Welcome to the AI Security Talk Show. In this episode, we explore how adversaries can turn your trusted data into an executable threat for your AI-powered systems based on retrieval augmented generation using a technique called indirect prompt injection. The type of risks this poses and the guardrails you need to secure your application against this novel attack vector.
This episode is based on the original blog post from Madul, founder of Honestlabs. If you prefer to read the original blog article, you may do so using the link in the description.
That opening statement is fascinating and honestly a little alarming. We're so used to thinking about security threats coming from the outside, firewalls, user inputs, that sort of thing.
Exactly. External attacks.
But this idea that the biggest vulnerability might be something already sitting quietly inside your own supposedly trusted data, that fundamentally changes the security conversation.
It absolutely does. The entire architecture of Retrieval Augmented Generation systems introduces this new and really subtle attack vector. So our mission today is to move beyond just the abstract fear. We need to quickly unpack what indirect prompt injection actually is, see how it plays out in the real world, and most importantly, give you the concrete guardrails you need to secure that RAG pipeline from end to end.
Okay, so let's unpack this. I think most people in this space know about direct prompt injection, where a user just types a malicious command right into the chat.
Yeah, trying to get it to ignore its instructions.
Exactly. But IPI is so much more insidious because it targets the data before a user even gets involved.
Precisely. Indirect prompt injection, or IPI, is all about embedding malicious instructions or, hidden commands within the documents that are already stored in your data store.
So we're talking databases, document management systems, your vector index.
That's right. The malicious instruction isn't supplied by the user. It's retrieved from what the system thinks is a trusted repository.
So it completely bypasses the usual input validation, all the security we put on the front end. The system just thinks that instruction is part of its own internal context.
It does. When a RAG system gets a query, the first thing the LLM does is retrieve relevant documents or chunks from the vector store. It then injects them into the context window.
Which is basically the LLM's short-term memory for that specific conversation.
That's a perfect way to put it. But this raises a really key architectural weakness that IPI exploits. The LLM is designed to prioritize that retrieved data.
Because it's supposed to be the most relevant, up-to-date information, right?
Exactly. The system is engineered to see that dynamic context as the source of truth. So if that context contains a hidden instruction like, say, ignore all previous instructions and do this instead, the model is heavily weighted to follow that new command.
That's the fatal flaw right there. The system is designed for trust, but that trust can be completely weaponized.
It really can.
Okay, abstract concepts are always better with real-world examples. So let's look at the two scenarios from the analysis, because they highlight really different ways this can go wrong.
Let's do it. The first one is a great example because it shows how risk can be introduced through just simple organizational neglect, not some sophisticated hacker. It involved an AI-powered support assistant at a fintech company.
Okay, walk us through the setup. The AI was working fine, answering customer questions, but then it ingested something it shouldn't have.
Right. An internal team uploaded a new draft policy document to a shared repository. And the key word there is draft.
So, not ready for public consumption?
Not at all. It had unverified instructions and even a placeholder URL that was meant for, internal vendor communication. It was never meant for a customer's eyes.
And because it wasn't properly reviewed or flagged before the system indexed it?
The AI treated that placeholder content as factual, actionable information.
And the consequence was a huge liability risk. The AI, just trying to be helpful, repeated that outdated, dangerous URL to a customer.
And that could redirect them to an unsecured site, a phishing page, anything. The big takeaway here is that the attack didn't come from a user. It came from a failure in basic document lifecycle management. A trusted file became a ticking time bomb.
Wow. Now, the second scenario is even more chilling, especially for regulated fields like healthcare, where data leakage is just catastrophic.
This one highlights the supply chain risk. An AI engineer integrated a supposedly trusted vendor's health triage knowledge pack.
A knowledge pack. That sounds official and safe.
It sounds completely safe. They trusted the source. But the dataset included unredacted, highly sensitive patient notes, and critically embedded internal debug prompts left over from testing.
Oh no, so things like print this variable or list the last 5 entries were being ingested as actual instructions.
Exactly. The AI started suggesting totally inappropriate, sometimes harmful treatments because it was being driven by these accidental debug prompts. And worst of all, during consultations, it started revealing sensitive, confidential patient details that were just pulled verbatim from those unredacted source documents.
That is a severe case of context poisoning.
Hmm.
And you're talking about a critical breach of confidential information, massive regulatory risks like IPO violations.
And it all brings us to this core shift in the security paradigm. The attack surface has fundamentally moved from the user interface to the data pipeline itself.
This is the aha moment, isn't it? Data is executable. In traditional security, we focus on data integrity to stop unauthorized changes to the data.
Right, making sure the document wasn't altered. But in RAG systems, data integrity also have to ensure that the retrieved content cannot alter the model's behavior in unintended ways.
So if your security team just thinks of data as files to be protected, they're missing the entire point.
They are. We're now dealing with files that, when they're retrieved, effectively behave like injected code inside the LLM's temporary memory.
So if you're only securing that user interaction layer of the chat box, you are fundamentally missing the real threat. The analysis is very clear that the target is the entire back-end workflow.
You have to secure the whole chain. That means putting defenses around the ingestion, the indexing, retrieval, and that final context injection pipeline. Ignoring any of those creates a blind spot.
This really sounds like we need a defense-in-depth strategy, securing every single gate the data passes through. Let's break down those 5 critical control points starting at the very beginning. Ingestion.
Right. Control point 1. Control what you bring in. This is your ultimate first line of defense. You have to only allow data from trusted, verified, secure sources.
Okay, I get checking for a trusted source, but how do you verify the content's integrity against these hidden prompts, especially if the document looks legitimate?
It's a two-pronged approach. First, you use cryptographic methods, signatures, checksums to validate the file hasn't been tampered with. But second, and this is key for IPI, you have to apply semantic scanning tools at ingestion to check for those hidden risks.
So you're looking for things that look like developer notes or, sensitive PII.
Exactly. Unredacted information, embedded prompts, things that just don't belong.
Okay, that leads right to the second point. Check data before use, so pre-indexing.
This is so crucial because once that data is vectorized and broken into chunks, those hidden instructions are much harder to find. Before you index, you have to scrutinize the content.
And this is where we would tag the data, right? How does tagging help specifically against IPI?
It's essential. When you find sensitive information or potential prompt fragments, you tag that data based on its sensitivity level. Confidential patient data or unverified internal draft, for example.
And that tag becomes metadata.
Exactly. And that metadata is the fuel for the next guardrail, which is all about preventing that confidential content from even being retrieved in the first place.
A perfect transition to control point 3. Set rules for data retrieval. This is basically access control for the vector store.
That's it. It's about defining clear access rules. The main tool here is metadata filtering. We don't just rely on similarity search. We use those tags from step 2 to prevent sensitive data exposure.
So for instance, a general customer service bot would be filtered to only retrieve documents tagged as public knowledge.
And it would never even see, let alone retrieve, a chunk from a document tagged as confidential.
That seems like a really efficient way to stop IPI before it ever reaches the model. But what if a malicious document somehow still gets through those first 3 gates?
And it can happen. That's why we need control point 4. Clean the retrieved data. This is your last-ditch effort before the prompt goes to the LLM. You have to have a cleansing step.
I understand cleansing, but isn't that really resource-intensive? Are we not better off just focusing all our efforts on ingestion?
It's a trade-off, and that's why the layered approach is so important. Ingestion controls are ideal, but they're not infallible. This step, while it adds latency, gives you robustness. You're not reprocessing the whole document.
You're just targeting the few dozen chunks that were actually retrieved.
Right. And the action here is to use, say, an intermediary LLM or a specialized parser to neutralize or just remove known harmful instructions from the retrieved text before it's combined with the user's prompt.
So we've secured the entry, the indexing, the retrieval, the preparation. We just need one final layer of observation. That brings us to control point 5. Monitor everything in real time.
This is absolutely non-negotiable. Threats evolve, human error happens. You have to constantly monitor the final AI outputs for any policy violations or sensitive data leakage. And the key tool here is something called lineage logging.
Can you explain lineage logging a bit more clearly? It sounds a little like just simple auditing.
It's much more surgical. Lineage logging is like an X-ray of the final output. It tracks and records which specific documents were accessed, which chunks were retrieved, and how they influence the final decision path.
So if the model leaks patient data,
The lineage log instantly tells you, this response was built using chunk 3 from document A. It allows you to immediately identify the source of the poison and surgically remove it.
that capability is a game changer for incident response in RG systems. You move from a broad investigation to surgical mitigation.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's bring this home with the core lessons. We covered a lot of ground, but the takeaways feel very actionable.
They are. The 3 main lessons for you, the listener, are pretty clear. First, you must fundamentally treat data as executable. Your document repository is a potential command and control center now.
Second, defend every gate. Ingestion, indexing, retrieval, and runtime, you need layered controls across the board.
And third, especially for those in regulated industries like fintech or healthcare, make your threat models industry-specific.
Yeah.
Generic security templates just won't cut it when the risks are this high.
So if we tie this all together, the big implication is that context is power.
It is. And we have to assume that power can and will be exploited.
So what's the final provocative thought for our listener to mull over?
If you're building or defending AI systems, you have to operate under a new assumption that your data sources can be malicious, even if they seem benign today. You have to design your security from the ground up, assuming that trust is a vulnerability, not a feature.
Indeed. We look forward to having you join us on the next deep dive, where we'll unpack even more of the complex systems shaping our world.